Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's ISC2 Knowledge Vault webinar. I'm super excited today. It's an opportunity that happens only once a year, and that is I get to have Steve Piper on, who's the founder and CEO of CyberEdge and also the editor-in-chief of Security Buzz, going through his CyberEdge 2025 Cyberthreat Defense Report. We do have a copy of that report over in our attachments and links section, along with the webinar deck that he's going to be going through today. But I promise this is always an insightful session every year. So I'm super excited to bring Steve on and to get into the meat and potatoes of his latest report. Steve, I purposefully, every time we do one of these for the CyberEdge report, I don't read the report ahead of time. And I want to come at this with just as surprised as our audience members. But as always, I'm sure you've got a lot of great material. So let's go ahead and turn things over to you, and I'll keep an eye out for questions from our audience.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. And I'm really excited about this. I've been doing webinars, as most of you know, for probably 5 years now for ISC2. And in my various webinars on different topics, I'll often cite research from the Cyberthreat Defense Report. We've been doing it for 12 years now. And but as Brandon said, once per year, I dedicate a topic of the webinar just to go over the key results of the CDR. So I'm sure that most of you are familiar with this report, but for those of you who aren't, just to level set everyone, there are tons of research reports out there. Most of the cybersecurity reports you read are about specific types of threats or threat actors or data breaches or things like this. This report is different. This report gets into the minds of cybersecurity professionals just like you, so that we can understand what's weighing on you. Okay, what keeps you up at night? What sorts of threats are you concerned about? What sort of IT security functions are most troubling? Are you embracing best practices? Where are you making investments? So that's what this report is all about. Every November, we conduct a 27-question online survey, and the respondents are all IT security professionals, and they work for organizations with 500 or more employees. Now, because we have 1,200 responses, and I'll get a little bit more into the demographics in just a moment, but because of our very large sample size, our report has a 3% survey margin of error. So what that means is our data is high quality, okay? And you can use this data, at least the global data. We do some analysis in the report by country or by industry, but the global results are very statistically significant, and you can use those to influence decisions in your organization. Now, the survey that we conduct is designed to assess the organization's security posture, perceptions of threats and challenges, current and future security investments, and IT security practices and strategies. So like I said, we had 1,200 respondents. We cover every continent, including Africa, 17 countries and 19 industries all around the world. This is one of the most geographically comprehensive cybersecurity studies that you're ever going to find. And we have a nice cross-section of company sizes, okay? So the small to medium size organizations, 500 to 1,000, that's only 1 out of 8 respondents. The sweet spot really is 1,000 to 10,000 employees, but we have a really nice cross-section. So what do I want you to do? This is the first of 2 slides where I'm going to tell you what I'm hoping you're going to get out of this webinar. The first of 2 things is as I go through the results, and in most cases, I'm going to read the exact survey question that was asked. When I unveil the results, I want you to think about how you would respond if you were one of these survey takers, and benchmark what your response would be against your peers. In this presentation, you'll be able to benchmark your response against your peers globally. If you download the report from the attachment section of this webinar, then in many instances, you'll be able to benchmark your response against your peers in your country and also your industry. So we cover a lot of different topics here across those key themes. But the second of 2 things I want you to do after comparing your response to your peers is I want you to use this report to lobby for change. This report can be your secret weapon, okay? If you feel that you didn't get enough budget increase in 2025 as compared to your peers, or you've been trying to convince the powers that be to invest in a certain technology, or to fully fund training and certification, or to launch that employee security awareness program, or take it to the next level, or you're looking for new ways to interact with board members. Maybe you want to outsource one or more functions to managed security service providers. Maybe you want to embrace a best practice or align with a framework. There's so many useful stats in here where you can use this report and share it with your boss or your boss's boss and say, hey, you know what? 9 out of 10 organizations are working with MSSPs to outsource challenging functions. Why aren't we? Okay, that's just one of many, many examples. So please use this report as your secret weapon to lobby for change. All right, now, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 sections of the report. This first section is current security posture. And we start out the survey in exactly the same way year after year. Roughly 60 to 65% in any given year of our questions are anchor questions. What I mean by that is we ask them year after year so that we can compare year over year results. At least a third of the questions, if not 40% of the questions we ask each year are new, because we certainly want to keep our survey fresh and our report fresh. But this is how we start out the survey every single year. Was your organization victimized by one or more successful attacks in the preceding 12 months? Now, we have about a decade's worth of data here, okay? And we see at the peak in 2021, keeping in mind the survey for the 21 CDR was in November of 20. That was at the height of the pandemic. So we did see a lot of work from home, a lot of BYOD embracing. So that's why we had that big jump from 81 to 86% year over year. And it held steady through the pandemic, but just in recent years, it's tipped down a little bit. I would submit to you that we're kind of at a new normal here. If you look at the 20 CDR, where the survey was in November of 19, before we were just starting to hear about what is this thing, a coronavirus? Then we were around 81%. We're back in that neighborhood, around 81, 82% of successful attacks. The dark blue is at least one attack. The dark red is 6 or more successful attacks. So things did level off from last year. The pie chart on the right talks about frequency. So 53% of those who were victimized between 1 and 5 times. Those poor 8% of those people were victimized by 10 or more times. Now, there is an optimism gap or a pessimism gap, depending on how you want to look at it. The next question we ask is, do you believe a successful attack is more likely than not in the coming year? Okay. Now, at the height of the pandemic, that was when security professionals were the most pessimistic. At that time, 3 and 4 of our respondents said, yeah, you know what? It is more likely than not. Okay. But then as the pandemic wound down, our attack surfaces were more under control because we had fewer remote workers, and also because we embraced technologies to mitigate the risks of work from home and supporting those remote employees. Pessimism has been on the decline, okay? So the glass is half full response is 1 out of 3 people think it's unlikely they're going to be victimized. The glass is half empty response is 2 out of 3, well, 64%. So almost 2 out of 3 think it is more likely than not. But the trend here is we're starting to feel a little more optimistic in recent years, the 3rd consecutive year of decreased pessimism, if you're following me. I think part of that is because of our defenses, because of artificial intelligence specifically. As a reminder, there are many wonderful Bright Talk recordings from webinars that Brandon and I have done, but also other webinars that ISC2 has produced in the ISC2 Bright Talk channel. If you search by my name specifically, you can find probably a couple of webinars that Brandon and I have done about artificial intelligence. And in last year's CDR, we asked who has the upper hand, and slightly more security professionals felt that security teams currently at the time slightly had the upper hand. And I think this perhaps is evidence that security pros are feeling similarly. Again, so almost 2 out of 3 believe it's coming, and you got to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. But pessimism is slightly on the decline. Another question we ask, and many of our questions are on a scale of 1 to 5. When we ask those questions, 5 is always highest. Rate your organization's overall security posture, okay, in other words, ability to defend against cyber threats in each of the following IT components, okay? Now, in our different charts like this, light blue is good or maybe not as bad. Dark red is bad. Dark blue is the next run lower than that, okay? So what we can take away from this chart, starting at the bottom in the dark red, mobile devices are this year's weakest link. Now, the range here, we're looking at hundreds of a decimal point, so there's not a huge range. So mobile devices, industrial control systems, SCADA devices, PLC devices, those are also challenging to secure. IoT devices, we've talked about this in the past, that we are seeing more things in the workplace. And these things have operating systems, these things have applications, and these applications are written by humans to errors. Humans could have vulnerabilities, they impose security risks. Also application containers, so we're talking about Docker and Kubernetes. These are the classes of IT assets that are most challenging to secure, at least among our respondents. Cloud apps, okay, specifically, SaaS-based applications, we're not as concerned about that, okay? Should we? There's a whole class of technology, SaaS security posture management, but maybe out of sight is, out of mind, for better or worse. But we're feeling a little bit more bullish about SaaS apps, static things like static servers, static data stores. We're feeling better about that because we can reach those devices anytime we need to, and we often stay on top of them. And then everything else is just kind of in between. All right, now over the recent years, we've had 2 indices, proprietary indices associated with our Cyber Threat Defense Report. We've had the Threat Concern Index and the Security Concern Index. This is a new index that we created for this year, and we call it the Security Posture Index. So what we do, and I'm going to go back a slide for just a moment here, what we do with these indices is we take every single respondent, and by the way, all 1,200 respondents fully completed our survey. So every single question has a sample size of 1,200. We take the ratings for each of these options for all 1,200 people, and we boil it down to one number. What is the average number across all the different options, across all 1,200 responses, okay? And so we boil it down to one number, and we call this the annual security posture index number. So we see, during the pandemic, it was higher because our attack surface increased overnight. It has been ticking down a little bit in recent years. This is the first time first time in 6 years that it's been below 4. So I do like the direction we're heading here. I'm a cybersecurity guy, but I'm also a marketing guy. My day job is I lead a marketing firm a marketing and research firm that is dedicated to working with cybersecurity providers like ISC2. So I am a marketing guy too. So I would say, hey, this is the 3rd consecutive year where our overall concern for security posture has been on the decline. Okay, so that's kind of interesting to note. Confidence in performing IT security functions. Scale of 1 to 5, 5 being highest. Rate the adequacy of your organization's capabilities in each of the following functional areas of IT. So these are processes, people and processes, okay, that we're talking about here. Dark red we know is bad. Third-party risk management, that is tied with user security awareness as the most challenging IT security function, okay? Detecting rogue insiders beyond that. 2 of these 3 are recurring themes here. in this year's report. User security awareness, we've talked about in the past. It's challenging. And when we get to my favorite question of the survey of what is standing in the way of being successful, user security awareness is either at the top or in top one or two year after year after year. When we get to the MSSP question, we're going to see that the number one function to outsource to a managed security service provider is detecting threats. Okay. And I think that's one of the reasons, because it is so challenging to perform internally. Third-party risk management is also very challenging to perform. The good news is there are solutions out there that are dedicated TPRM solutions, where when you onboard new vendors, onboard new partners, when we at CyberEdge go through this, we have dozens of clients that have more than $1 billion in revenue, but you don't need to have $1 billion in revenue to take third-party risk management seriously. Every organization should. And we have to go through the process to make sure that we are not a cybersecurity risk to our customers and to our partners. But that is a challenging function. At the top of the list, identity and access management, we're feeling a little better about that. Incident investigation response, GRC, security engineering, and brand protection, we're feeling a little more bullish about these particular functions. All right, one section down, 2 to go. Perceptions and concerns. So let's get into the heads of security professionals here. Scale of 1 to 5, 5 being highest. Rate your overall concern for each of the following types of cyber threats targeting your organization. Okay. The 4 here are pretty much on, at the top 4 year after year. Malware, okay, all kinds of different malware out there, phishing and spear phishing attacks, ransomware, and then in recent years, account takeover attacks that are often associated with credential abuse attacks, stolen credentials bought on the dark web, and bots being used to try to authenticate, to different websites and applications, and you guys catch the drift there. Now, at the bottom of the list here are zero-day attacks, and I do understand why this is at the bottom. Zero-day attacks, it's sort of good news, bad news here. Okay, so zero-day attack is malware that's constructed to exploit an unknown vulnerability. So a vulnerability that is discovered by the threat actor, and presumably the software company who produced the OS of the app, they're completely unaware that this vulnerability exists. So for organizations that are using legacy-based defenses that are predominantly signature-based, these zero-day attacks can sail through them, without even being noticed. Okay. The good news here, there's 2 pieces of good news. One is of the vulnerabilities that are logged each year in MITRE's CVE database. So MITRE, the nonprofit organization that maintains this database of vulnerabilities called CVE, Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, less than 1% of CVEs each year originate as zero-day vulnerabilities. So they're few in number. But the other piece of the good news, and this goes back to AI, is our defenses are better than ever. And so not only are we good at detecting known threats targeting known vulnerabilities, we're also good at detecting, and have been for quite a while, unknown threats targeting known vulnerabilities. But now, because of AI and machine learning and other advancements, we're even great at detecting unknown threats that are targeting unknown vulnerabilities. So these zero-day vulnerabilities are shorter lived these days than they have been in the past. That's good news. Supply chain threats. One might think that, we hear about these supply chain attacks, like SolarWinds and many more in the news, but I think part of the reason why this is less concern is because the number of them. Okay, when there is a big one, it is big, and it affects a lot of people, a lot of companies and people. But on the grand scheme of things, they are fewer. I don't know, Brandon, let me ask you to chime in here. Supply chain threats. Does that make sense to you? Why less concern?
Well, I think the concerns, it's twofold, right? There's the physical supply chain components, but then there's also the software supply chain. And maybe it's something further down in your research list here, but I'm seeing a fair amount of concern, but largely mitigated, shall I say, around supply chain for software. So think of it as your software bill of materials, or SBOM. But I am seeing, of course, current events being what they are, physical assets ramping up a little bit more on the supply chain and not as well covered. So I think it could be the situation that we've got the software side figured out, and therefore it's kind of dropped down on the concern list.
Yeah. And on the physical side, I'm an independent, voter. I'm an American independent, and so I am. Everybody ticks me off. But I think supply chain threats are, when you talk about physical because of tariffs, that I think is going to be affecting a lot of organizations. So I think we're going to see some supply chain issues in a lot of different industries that are completely unrelated to cyber threats. So, all right, great. So let me move on. Like we did with the security posture index, where we average together all the 1 to 5 ratings, we average together all the 1 to 5 ratings of all those different types of cyber threats across all 1,200 respondents and boil it down to one number. Okay, so I view this as a number of in any given year. Are we more or less concerned than we were in the year before about threats? Now, at the height of the pandemic, we were very concerned. That was our peak. Since the pandemic, we're leveling down, and we're certainly concerned, but not as concerned. So I think this is an interesting measure to compare year over year concerns for overall concerns for threats. All right, and then we asked a similar question, but this was specifically for web and mobile attacks. Which of the following attacks on your web and mobile applications are most concerning? Okay, ATO, credential stuffing attacks, top of the list. No, I don't think there's any surprise there. Personally identifiable information harvesting, carding, payment fraud attacks, digital skimming, ad fraud, denial of inventory, and hoarding attacks. All of these are significant concerns to security professionals. Okay, now we issued our press release when we announced this report on yesterday on Tuesday. The headline of our press release is almost half of ransom payers never got their data back. Okay, so let's talk about ransomware here, and I have a few slides. There's a couple pieces of good news, but then there is a very big piece of bad news here. And the green arrows that you see are related to the good news. The bad arrow that you see is related to bad news. So let's work our way left to right. On the left, percentage of organizations victimized by ransomware. So last year with our 24 CDR, we saw, I believe it was the first ever decline in successful ransomware attacks, and a pretty decent jump from 73 to 64%. It leveled off, okay, but it's still a decline. It's about a 1.5 decline from last year to this year. So that's the good news. I like the trend that we're heading in. Organizations are investing in best of breed technologies that incorporate, innovations in AI. So fewer organizations are being victimized by ransomware. Still more than half. Okay, if you're going to flip a coin right now to see if you're going to be impacted by ransomware, for the next 12 months, just flip it, and there's your answer. I mean, it's almost a coin flip here. In fact, it's worse than a coin flip. 63% rounding up were victimized by ransomware attack last year. Okay. Now, the second piece of good news in terms of trends is the percentage of victimized organizations paying ransoms is also falling. That is great news. Okay. Nobody wants to fund this multi-billion-dollar ransomware industry. Okay. Brandon and I did a webinar, and perhaps it's still on the Bright Talk channel for ISC2, a ransomware deep dive, to pay or not to pay. That is the question. We debated the pros and cons, and at the end of the day, I would submit that it's not a black and white decision. There's a lot of variables that go into it. And in the case of hospitals, one of those variables could be human lives, okay, which we've talked about in previous webinars. One of the ingredients that you need to weigh is the likelihood that if you pay the ransom, will you ultimately get the decryption keys and get your data back? And of course, there's other threats related to ransomware, like maybe they've exfiltrated your data, and unless you pay the ransom, they're going to expose your data on the internet. Maybe threaten to do a DDoS attack. So there are other things, but related to data recovery, this is something you need to weigh in. Okay, so in recent years, it was close to 3 and 4. It was 73% in a couple of years ago. So almost 3 out of 4 ransom payers did get the decryption keys, were able to rapidly recover or reasonably rapidly recover, at least recover more quickly than if they had to do it manually, or if they didn't have the data at all. That's another factor. But we saw a big drop from 23 to 24, and that was not an anomaly. Okay, so this is the second year that we're in that range. So we went from 73 to 57%. Okay, and then from last year we went from 57 to 54%. This is troubling. This is bad business. Okay, and these ransomware gangs, they should be smarter, because if organizations learn, and more than 50,000 security professionals download our Cyberthreat Defense Report every single year, but when word gets out that ransomware gangs are largely not holding up their end of the deal, then this is going to be an ingredient. And it's possible that because we did a press release last year, it's possible that's why we're seeing the trend of fewer organizations paying ransoms, because they're noticing that, hey, fewer organizations are getting those decryption keys so that they can get their data back. Brandon, what are your thoughts here on this subject?
I see the numbers and the trends and hear what you're saying, but don't forget that even if you do get the decryption keys, there may be a speed to decrypt problem. That's not exactly optimized code going decrypting it. So I've heard stories and anecdotes of organizations getting the key, but then still having to recover some systems from backup to restore business operations because the decryption was taking so long. It was faster to restore the data from tape or cloud backup. So I think that's an interesting data point here. But hey, I'm happy to see these things trending down.
Yeah, it is good news overall. So it's good that fewer organizations are paying. What is interesting is, and this is the only stat from outside of CyberEdge. This is unrelated to our survey. This is just there's a company called Coveware. I say this every year, and it's still true. I don't believe I've ever knowingly met anyone who works for Coveware. I don't have any relationship with Coveware, but I do like their quarterly ransomware reports. So this is one of many organizations that you can hire to do ransomware consulting, and they can negotiate with the ransomware gangs, and they're often able to get the ransom down by a factor of half, like 50% reduction in the demanded ransomware payment. But according to their data, unaffiliated with us, I just think it's interesting to see is that we are seeing average ransoms on the increase. At the high point in Q3 of 23, it was 851,000. And then at the low point, it was 382 in recent low point, but it has stepped up every quarter of last year. All right, so enough about ransomware. This is my favorite question that we ask every year. Okay, and it's a scale 1 to 5 question. Rate how each of the following inhibit your organization from adequately defending itself against cyber threats. Okay, in other words, what is standing in the way of being successful in doing your job? What is inhibiting you? Okay, low security awareness among employees, lack of skilled personnel. We hear this time and time again. Brandon and I did a webinar just recently providing suggestions on actionable tips for recruiting and retaining security talent. So if you missed that webinar, check it out in the ISC2 Bright Talk channel. But those are definitely the top two that are weighing heavily on security professionals. At the bottom of the list, this wasn't always at the bottom. Lack of budget for many years was always at the bottom. But because of improvements in security solutions to eliminate those false positives or reduce them, too many false positives is our least concern. Lack of budget is the next least, and lack of management support after that. Now, the third and final index is the Security Concern Index. I jokingly call this the stress index, how stressed out are security professionals. So, so we take the average 1 to 5 ratings across all of those inhibitors that are preventing security pros from being successful, average it together across all 1,200 respondents, and we have what we'll call it a 6-year low. From the height of the pandemic, an average of 3.65 down to 3.42, which is very similar to last year. Okay. New question we asked, this one related to attack surface management challenges. What are the biggest challenges pertaining to attack surface management within your organization? Okay. And when we say attack surface management, what we're talking about is first identifying your attack surface, which that is not always a slam dunk. Not only your internal assets, but your internet-facing assets, understanding what vulnerabilities there are, potential security misconfigurations, security risks of all kinds of things. So all of this pertains to attack surface management. The biggest challenge, lack of adequate personnel. Okay, no big shock there, because that is one of the big inhibitors overall. Poor integration between existing security tools. I think this is an opportunity for security vendors to provide better integration. Insufficient testing for web application vulnerabilities. Okay, not all vulnerability management providers provide separate tools for scanning homegrown web applications, especially 2/3, I believe is the stat, of web applications are on the OWASP top 10 list. And so, so everyone who produces, homegrown applications should be scanning those applications for vulnerabilities. Down at the bottom of the list here, lack of visibility into on-premises assets. Okay, that's at the bottom of the list. It's still 1 out of 4 security professionals are concerned about that. Inadequate penetration testing. We do see that there are a growing number of pen testing tools, and there's pen testing as a service. That is now something you can outsource. And then other challenges in between. More challenges. Now we're talking about hybrid multi-cloud challenges. What are the biggest challenges to your organization caused by having a hybrid multi-cloud environment? Okay, that is an environment that includes on-premises systems and 2 or more cloud platforms. Okay, top of the list, detecting unsanctioned applications, also known as cloud shadow IT. Shadow IT is the term that we use when we talk about users using applications like Box or Dropbox or Gmail or not Gmail, Google Docs, Google Sheets to share information outside the organization. There's all kinds of security risks there. It's even more of an issue when these applications are shared in cloud environments. Monitoring security events across the disparate ecosystem, okay, on-prem and across multiple cloud environments. Managing identities and access control. We're going to talk about identity security in just a few moments. Down at the bottom of the list, orchestrating security processes is a concern for just over 1 out of 4, correlating information across environments and protecting APIs. Boosting careers with cybersecurity certifications. Okay, so based on your organization's current climate, which of the following types of cybersecurity certifications do you believe would be most beneficial for your career path. So I'm a CISSP. I have been for more than a decade. I'm a huge proponent of training and certification. This is something we talked about in our webinar recording, for tips for recruiting and retaining security talent. But you don't have to just go after your CISSP or some certification that covers lots and lots of different domains. There are specific types of training and certification. And so we asked, which of the following do you believe would be most beneficial to your career path? Security management at the top of the list, security engineering beyond that, and entry-level security fundamentals. There's a lot of security professionals out there that recently crossed over from IT, or maybe they were tired of their career that they initially chose. And they got some training, and now they're in their first or second job, but they really want to get some additional training to do their job even better. Cloud security. When we asked this question, I think it was 3 years ago, cloud security, I believe at the time was at the top of the list. It's still pretty popular. Almost 1 in 3 believe cloud security would be beneficial. But all of these different areas can be beneficial depending on your career and where you want your career to go. So food for thought. All right, 2 sections down, 2 more to go. This next section is current and future investments. Okay. Remember when I said I want you to be able to use this report as your secret weapon to lobby for change? Here, this section is particularly relevant to that. Okay. So we asked an interesting question that we asked in 2018, 20, and then we haven't asked it for 5 years. And we thought we would throw it back in the mix to see if anything had changed. We asked, what percentage of your employer's IT budget, okay, is allocated to information security? Now, when we say information security, we're talking about products and services and personnel, okay, kind of all in, but everything related to security. I remember a couple decades ago, 20, 25 years ago, that I believe it was Gartner did a press release, and they determined that about 5% of an IT budget was allocated to security. Those days are long, long, long gone. Okay. For the past few years, it's been around 13%. Okay. 12.5, 13%. So in other words, 1 out of every 8 IT dollars is spent on security. Now the table below gives breakdowns of responses. Very few said more than 20%. Very few said 1 to 5%. It was kind of in the middle there. But that was the mean, so around 13%. Now, if you believe that your organization is under investing in security, and if you believe it's more like 6 or 7%, then you can use this report as data saying, hey, you know what? We're way behind our peers here. We do need to invest more in security. And here's data for you. Now, a question we ask each year is about the health of the security budget for the coming year. Okay. This chart right here is the percentage of organizations that have rising security budgets in 25. Now, I want to caveat this. Okay. This survey took place before the election. Okay. It took place before, the recent economic uncertainty. Okay. But when we asked this question in early to mid-November of last year, 80%, 4 out of 5 organizations had rising IT security budgets. Was a fall, okay, from 89% in the prior year. In fact, in 2024, we saw that being a peak, okay? Security budgets are still healthy, but they're not going up as much as they did in the previous year. Specifically, in the coming year, when we asked this question in November, the average rising security budget was rising by 4.3%. Okay. Now in 24, it was averaging about a 5.7% increase. Okay. But again, if your organization is flat, this is something you may be able to use this report to lobby for maybe some additional investment. I mentioned a few moments ago we'd revisit identity security. Well, here we are. This was a new question that we asked this year. And identity security is a very hot topic. Okay. The RSA conference is coming up right around the corner in San Francisco. I hope to bump into you many there. It'll be like my 15th or 16th consecutive RSA conference. But we asked, what are your organization's top priorities in the next 12 months for improving identity security? Okay. Top of the list, and this stood out pretty significantly, detecting and responding to identity-related threats. Next, strengthening identity governance and administration, improving your identity hygiene, okay, removing vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in identity management systems. Down at the bottom of the list, still more than 1 in 4 identify shadow administrators, okay, unmanaged identities used to access cloud services, or extend the use of step-up authentication with multi-factor authentication. Brandon and I did a webinar recently on passwordless authentication, and we talked a lot about the importance of multi-factor authentication and different mechanisms for that. AI continues to be a very hot topic. We would have been remiss if we didn't dedicate at least one question on the topic for artificial intelligence. So we repeated a question that we asked 4 years ago, and we can see the comparison in responses in the chart on the right. Dark blue is from our 21 CDR. Light blue is from this year's 25 CDR. Okay, so we asked, select the option that best describes your organization's overall preference for purchasing security products that feature artificial intelligence technologies. Okay, and so if you add together the 46.9% moderate preference and then the 35.2% strong preference, you add that up, 82% have, I would call that a significant preference for security tools that feature AI. What's interesting is, as compared to 4 years ago, the strong preferences dropped a little bit, the moderate preferences increased a little bit. I think, Brandon, we're reaching a point, and I'm not sure if this question is going to be much value, because I think if we wait another 4 years to ask this question again, I think it's just going to be a foregone conclusion that saying, what are you talking about? Don't all security tools have some form of AI built into them? I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely spot on. I don't think it's going to take 4 years. I'm already seeing some colleagues of mine telling me that their budgets have gone up because they're starting to have to essentially pay the quote AI premium on their renewals for existing products. So coupled with, organizations are experimenting a lot with, some open source AI capabilities to tie some of their disparate security products together. Back earlier on, you had on a slide that, the tools don't necessarily talk to each other, right? So they're starting to use some of this capability to glue those together. So I think you're probably more like maybe 12 to 18 months away from that, personally.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. But if you do have tools that you feel are not optimally designed based on other tools that are available, this could be a compelling event to make that switch. So something to think about. I am a proponent of managed security service providers. Okay, and one of the top 2 inhibitors that are standing in the way, it's lack of skilled personnel. Okay. So we asked this question, which was identical to what we asked in 22. Which of the following IT security functions does your organization outsource to a managed security service provider? Select all that apply. Down to the 10th of a point, same thing. 3 years ago, 41.1, detecting and responding to advanced cyber threats. And MSSPs call this capability MDR, managed detection and response. Okay, hunting for cyber threats is one of the most challenging things that you could ever do. And we see in the chart on the left that 89.7, let's call it, almost 90% of organizations are outsourcing one or more functions to an MSSP. Ticked down a tiny bit from 3 years ago, from 93%, but that's still strong. Okay. This is a slam dunk. If you're like most security professionals and you're stressed out by lack of skilled personnel, especially as it pertains to detecting against threats, this can be your stat where you say, hey, you know what? 9 out of 10 are outsourcing functions to MSSPs. The number one function to outsource is MDR. Why can't we take advantage of this? It kills two birds with one stone. You're embracing best practices because these MDR. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I remember a television commercial. It was Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the commercial, the slogan was, "We do chicken right." Okay, we don't do burgers, we don't do pizzas, we don't do subs. We do chicken, and we do chicken right. Well, these MDR vendors, they do detection and response right. It's a core competency. They're embracing best in class technologies. They're embracing best in class methodologies. Okay, best practices, and so you can kill two birds with one stone. So what I mean by that is you can improve your abilities organizations to detect advanced threats while also mitigating that skills gap if you happen to have a skills gap related to threat detection. Okay, so I think I'm a big proponent. What's interesting is when we asked this question, and I think it was 2019, the number one thing at the very top of the list was managing vulnerability scans. Okay, and then 3 years later, it dropped from number one to the bottom of the list. These days, it's second to the bottom of the list. Yeah. So, but lots of reasons to outsource functions to MSSPs. Okay, the next 4 charts are very similar, and they all relate to investments in security technologies. And you'll see in the table, the first column is currently in use. The middle column is plan for acquisition. The third column is really no plans at all. Okay, the darker the shade of blue, the bigger the number. Okay, so this slide, we're talking about network security. So which network security technologies are you embracing? Number one at the top of the list for currently in use is secure email gateway. Okay, but plan for acquisition, and this is where I think it's interesting to look at what is the hottest network security technology plan for acquisition this year. Number one at the top of the list, next generation firewalls. So we're combining firewall, intrusion prevention, application control, and in some instances, secure web gateway technology all into one unified solution. That remains to be very hot. Deception technology, if you're not familiar with that, think honeypots, but to a very sophisticated level, building honeypots into network assets. And then in a moment, we're going to see deception technology on endpoints. That is very hot right now. Okay, network behavior analysis, advanced threat protection. These are also tools that can be used for threat hunting. On the endpoint security side, basic antivirus, signature-based defenses, I don't see those going away anytime soon because they're great at detecting known threats, and the better ones are great at detecting unknown threats targeting known vulnerabilities. Okay, but the point here is something's known. Now, if you can use those tools to get rid of the easy stuff, then that frees up bandwidth for other tools to detect advanced stuff that is much more resource intensive. So I do think that signature-based defenses aren't going away anytime soon. But that middle column here, plan for acquisition, deception technology. Okay, Google it. There's a lot of vendors out there. Many of them have been acquired by other vendors, but it's really cool technology. If you can detect a threat actor that is connecting to a managed honeypot, okay, that is maybe a Windows operating system with Microsoft Office or whatever applications where nothing is patched, and you see them connecting to this device, they shouldn't have ever connected to it. Why would they? Okay, it's because they got in, they're moving laterally, they're scanning the network. Well, that's great. Now you can shut them down. We talk about the kill chain, okay, is a term we use to describe all the steps involved in an advanced persistent threat. You can detect them before they're able to do any more damage. On the app and data security side, database firewalls, WAFs, web application firewalls, and I'm so glad to see API gateways being commonly used. That years ago was at the bottom of the list, and it's been rising up through the charts. There's a lot of security risks associated with APIs. But number one plan for acquisition this year, bot management, using technology to distinguish between good bots and bad bots. We go back to those account takeover attacks, the credential stuffing attacks. That's often associated with bots that are trying to authenticate to systems over and over and over, using different credentials, because people often use the same password for different systems. Bot management solutions can help shut that down. And then finally, security management and operations. Number one currently in use. This is something that has been rising over the years. Active Directory protection. Glad to see patch management, security configuration management near the top of the list. Number one for this year, advanced security analytics technologies, setting baselines for normal activity and detecting deviations, part of a sensible threat hunting practice. Okay. All right. Final section. This is a great time to ask questions, and we'll save a few minutes for your questions. Practices and strategies. New question we asked this year: which frameworks and standards does your organization use to assess the effectiveness and compliance of your cybersecurity program? Number one, top of the list, and a clear number one here, the Cloud Security Alliance Cloud, and this should say controls, plural. Sorry for the typo, but Cloud Controls Matrix. Okay, lots of different domains and security standards related to cloud security. So I was happy to see that. NIST Cybersecurity Framework, that's also very popular. CMMC, especially for federal contractors and so on. But lots of organizations embracing these different frameworks and standards. Zero Trust. Brandon and I just recently did a webinar on Zero Trust, and overwhelmingly, the vast majority of organizations are embracing Zero Trust. But we asked, describe your agreement with the following statement: implementing Zero Trust network access in our organization has significantly improved our security posture and our ability to defend against sophisticated threats. Okay, 86%, almost 9 out of 10 respondents feel pretty strongly that Zero Trust has made a difference in their organization. I believe it is a game changer. Okay, and keeping in mind what we talked about last time, Zero Trust is not a technology; it's a framework. It's a mindset. And so please check out that webinar replay in the ISC2 Break Talk channel if you missed it. What types of information are most important to present to your organization's board of directors on a regular basis? Top of the list, the overall assessment of the cybersecurity program maturity or effectiveness. So I really like that. Working with an organization to bring in a fresh set of eyes, okay, to evaluate the maturity of your program. I think that's a great idea. If you agree with me, use this report to lobby for that change. Quantified estimates of the costs of attacks, okay? Assessments of threat landscape and specific threats, and so on down the line. And benchmarks against peer organizations. I think that's going to be higher. Next month, we're going to be talking about how to fully leverage vulnerability management technologies, and many or some of the major vulnerability management providers provide the ability to benchmark your organization's security posture against your peers. I think we're going to see that number rise in the years ahead. And then finally, the last question we ask each year is describe your organization's deployment plans for each of the following emerging IT security technologies. There is number one at the top of the list is identity threat detection and response. Okay, I talked about how hot identity security is right now. This is evidence of that. IoT security is also very big. SaaS security posture management, I'm happy to see that, and a lot of cloud technologies. But across all of these different emerging technologies, nearly 2/3 of organizations have begun implementing all of them, or each of these technologies has been implemented by 2 out of 3 organizations. So I'm glad to see that. If your organization it hasn't embraced any of these technologies, use the report as your secret weapon to lobby for change. All right, let's summarize here and take a few questions. The road ahead, we continue to face many challenges, okay? More than 80% of organizations are successfully attacked year after year after year. That's bad. I mean, no one's happy about that. More than 60% are victimized by ransomware each year. More than 45% of ransom payers fail to recover their encrypted data. Take that into consideration when deciding to pay a ransom. More than 90% of organizations are experiencing attack surface management challenges. Low security awareness continues to plague security teams, and mobile devices, ICS and IoT, remain challenging to secure. But there are positive signs of progress. Successful ransomware attacks are slowly declining. Fewer organizations are paying ransoms, which is great. Pessimism is on the decline. Organizations are strengthening their identity security postures. Security budgets, all things considered, are healthy. 4 out of 5 budgets are increasing by an average of 4.3%. Organizations are embracing innovative new security technologies. Okay, so please download the report. It's in the attachment section. We are so grateful to have ISC2 as a platinum sponsor of our report year after year after year. We could not have this report if it weren't for our platinum sponsors like ISC2. We also created a custom infographic, okay, just for ISC2, and that is also available in the attachment section. And then one quick plug before we take your questions. Just keep in mind, Security Buzz is a great new source for cybersecurity news. And just like I did last month, we are offering, if you go to securitybuzz.com and you register for our newsletter, which I was hoping was going to launch today, but now I'm hoping next week. If you register, you will have a chance to win a $100 Amazon certificate. And I'll be announcing the name of that winner next month on May 21st when Brandon and I do another Knowledge Vault webinar. But congratulations to Sonny from Arizona. He is our most recent winner of the Amazon gift card. If you are based outside the United States and you're randomly selected, you'll get a Tango card instead of Amazon, so you can use it in your country for different gift certificate options. So Brandon, any questions?
I got time for just one because we're coming up at the top of the hour here. How do you think your results in the survey are going to change with that advent of AI? And how I said, I think we're 12 months away from it being baked in. Do you think we're going to see dramatic improvements in both outlook of professionals in this space and results?
I am an optimist. I want to, I hope that the good guys are going to stay ahead of the bad guys. But I do know that the bad guys are embracing it, and we're starting to see increased volume of threats. Now, whether that also yields to increased sophistication, that remains to be seen. Later this year, you and I are going to do a webinar on deep fakes. I'm telling you, deep fakes scare the heck out of me. Okay,
I can't wait for that one.
Yeah, that's going to, I think we're going to see a lot more about that in the years ahead. Lots of things to consider there. So I wish I could, my crystal ball just isn't clear. The optimist, I'm hoping things will continue to get better, but we'll see.
I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation. Steve, once again, thanks so much. I love when you come on and give this report. Thanks to you all there in the audience. It's been great having you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation, everybody. Be well.